Taipei, vibrant capital of Taiwan, cultural melting pot. The island republic is considered a democratic role model in Asia, a high-tech country combining tradition and modernity. Its vast wealth derives primarily from its semiconductor industry, one that sets market standards the world over. But free Taiwan is under threat, and along with it, the global economy with its sensitive supply chains. Totalitarian China wants to annex the small country's liberal democracy. Ruler for life, Xi Jinping has vowed to make Taiwan part of the Communist People's Republic. China aggressively threatens to conquer the island and seal off the Taiwan Strait, the strait that separates dictatorship and democracy. Taiwan is preparing for the prospect of war. The population is learning how to react in the event of an invasion, how to defend itself, and possibly even survive. The unrelenting threat is an inescapable fact of everyday life in Taiwan. What the people there want most of all is to live in freedom and without intimidation.
Hi, my name is Sylvia Chain. I'm 36 years old. I was born in Brazil, raised in Paraguay, and I went to the United States when I was 13 years old. I came back to Taiwan when I was 7 years ago, and I'm running a coffee and tea shop here in Taipei. And I also run as a tea producer, tea fields away from Taipei for about 3 hours drive in Nantou City.
Born in Brazil, Sylvia is one of an increasing number of young people returning to the island. This is where their family's roots lie. The threat from China was not enough to keep Sylvia away. Sylvia's plantation is in central Taiwan, 2,000 meters above sea level.
Nantou is the center of Taiwan, where most of the teas are grown there. I usually go there and spend days, weeks to when the harvesting season starts. I stay there to taste the teas, look at the teas, the conditions of the tea leaves, and taste the flavors if it's legit, if it's okay for me to purchase them, and also to deal with the farmers, to catch up with them, to kind of know how they're doing, so that you maintain the relationship with the farmers.
Taiwan's indigenous people live in the mountains. The democratic government now grants autonomous rights to 16 different tribes. Today, the indigenous people speak their own language and live their culture, just as they did thousands of years ago. The start of the colonial age in the 16th century marked the arrival of the first Portuguese, Dutch, and Spanish sailors. Traders from the Chinese mainland settled on the island as well. The tea trade between Taiwan and China has flourished ever since.
Teas in Taiwan. It's an everyday thing. China has this demand, the high demands basically, for Taiwanese teas because they know the quality of the teas we have here, the way we grow, the pesticides we use, the fertilizers we use, especially organic fertilizers like these tea plantations we have right here. So they have high demands not only because of that, but also the flavors, the journey that we have is complete, and they love the teas we have.
However, their shared love of tea is not enough to appease the conflict between Taiwan and China. People like Sylvia who export to China must be prepared for difficulties and possible financial losses.
Throughout the year, we've been having troubles constantly. Every once in a while, in average, basically, every year we face the export problem into China. So we have to distribute the risk.
A significant share of global trade passes through the strait. So a potential blockade of this Taiwanese trade route is one way China threatens the island republic and the Western world. Taiwan is in China's crosshairs. Whether in the high mountains of Nantou or in the streets of Taipei, the threat is real and ever-present. The conflict affects the daily lives of the island's inhabitants. And thus, the threat of war also affects the work of artist Asta Wu.
Hi, I am Asta Wu. I'm an illustrator from Taipei. I was born and raised in New Taipei City, and right now this is a studio in Taipei Arts Village. I like to draw illustration for kids and do picture book for them. I was focused more on the social issue, and I want to make a serious illustration picture book for the adults.
The 30-year-old creates very personal versions of reality with her pens. Art helps her process the threat under which she lives and suffers.
One day I just feel that I have many emotions in my mind, and then I felt only the art can make me feel better. And every time when I draw with my pens, my color pencil, and even in my digital techniques like a computer, I feel that when I'm making the serial illustration, when I create some stories, the feeling behind my mind, and I can use it to tell a real story. And this story somehow can just go far beyond my imagination. So I love the feeling of that my story can talk more than myself. So that's the reason why I became an artist.
Asta Wu has illustrated a complete children's book addressing the threat of war. Her drawing style seems to trivialize the horrors of war. The artist has chosen this form of representation very deliberately.
I think that's like humor in Taiwanese, because we like to make it. Sometimes when we try to like tell information to others, if we think if we make it more cuter or more a little bit like picture book, then more people can accept it. Because sometimes serious topic make people, they don't want to have access to it. So we just want to make it colorful and make the character more vivid. Then we will be more acceptable to this kind of serious topic.
Asta uses her book to impart knowledge that might help in an emergency. Among other things, how to recognize friend and foe by their uniforms. Many institutions in Taiwan are constantly reassessing just how real the danger of an attack by China actually is. Security expert Crystal Tu provides one assessment.
China has the revisionist powers. They are under a kind of the historical sense of narrative is that after century accumulations from the 90s to 20s, in the early 20s, they have to restore the kind of the historical status that China once had, and also the historical powers they have to the other nearby regions.
The origin of the conflict lies far in the past. In 1949, the Chinese Communist Party, under the leadership of Mao Zedong, prevailed over the so-called Chinese nationalists. This had been preceded by 22 years of bloody civil war. On October 1st, 1949, Mao Zedong proclaimed the People's Republic of China on Tiananmen Square in Beijing. With the Communists' victory, the Republic of China, founded in 1912, came to an end, at least on the mainland. Mao created a country that follows the rule of the party and its leader alone. Xi Jinping then ultimately transformed China into a dictatorship with an absolute claim to power.
That kind of mentality is the main drive for all the Chinese activities in the regions. They are invested heavily on many different aspects. They want to be economic powers, political powers, and also military powers. And also very important is the information powers, the kind of way they can control the narrative to show China has been rise peacefully. But as we see from the South China Sea issue, it's not entirely peaceful.
The Second World War ended in August 1945 with the Allied victory over Japan. Freed from Japanese colonial rule, Taiwan fell to the Republic of China. And it was here that Chinese nationalist leader Chiang Kai-shek escaped Mao's persecution. Some 2 million people fled the mainland along with him. Taipei was declared the provisional capital of the Republic of China. Two Chinas have faced each other in bitter enmity ever since. For a long time, the world accepted Taiwan as the representative of all of China. This ended when the United States established diplomatic relations with Beijing in 1979. Following the historic visit of U.S. President Richard Nixon to Mao Zedong in 1972. Even then, access to the huge Chinese market was a powerful lure. As early as 1971, the United Nations handed over China's seat to the People's Republic, effectively excluding Taiwan from the international community.
This pressure from China, from the People's Republic of China, it's been around for decades now, right? So the threat of China, of CCP, this is something that we've lived with for decades. I mean, I remember going to school here as an elementary school student, and every year there's a air raid exercise. And so it's just something that we've always been aware of.
Xi Jinping is steadily increasing the pressure on Taiwan. Aggressive naval maneuvers are intended to underscore China's claim to power. Meanwhile, Taiwan also reports near-daily violations of its airspace by Chinese warplanes. These threatening gestures are also directed at the USA. The latter pursues a one-China policy, which stipulates that the status between China and Taiwan may only be changed peacefully and by mutual agreement.
They try to emphasize the kind of messages about there's nothing you can do.
The Republic of China under Chiang Kai-shek was also anything but a democracy. The inhabitants of Taiwan resisted his autocratic rule. He brutally suppressed all uprisings against his party, the Kuomintang. In 1949, he imposed martial law, which remained in force in Taiwan until 1987. Thousands of people were imprisoned and tortured in prisons like this one in Taipei during Chiang's despotic rule. After Chiang's death in 1975, his son initiated modest reforms. In 1986, the formation of a new party was permitted for the first time. The people of Taiwan are proud of the nonviolent revolution that gave birth to their democracy. And they are all too familiar with the horrors that every dictatorship brings.
This place is Jinping Memorial Park. The White Terror, it is a long history of Taiwan, and many people lost their rights when during this time. Some of them, their parents or sibling or any relatives were took by the police and the government. So I would say there was a great loss of many Taiwanese.
During the years of the White Terror, up to 32,000 people are said to have been murdered. There is a nameplate for each of these victims on the memorial's memory lane. The period of resistance and democratic awakening formed the foundation of the new Taiwan. It is precisely this experience of dictatorship that makes the inhabitants shudder at Xi's People's Republic. It's also motivated the democratic awakening on the island.
Coming out of White Terror, there was the Wild Lily movement. And then basically every decade, you'll have something out of the wild lily. There was wild strawberries, and then you have the sunflowers, and so on. You know, I mean, to probably a historian or a political scientist or a sociologist can answer a little bit better as to why that is. But my sense is that coming out of White Terror, the pro-democracy activists who fought so hard for this democracy that we have today, after we transition into democracy, they're much embedded in the society.
The most recent of these democracy movements, the Sunflower Movement, happened in April 2014. At that time, the conservative government tried to sneak a trade agreement with Beijing past the parliament, which would have sealed Taiwan's total economic dependence on China. People protested and occupied parliament for 24 days.
惊讶吧。
Before the Sunflower Movement, most protests of this magnitude were simply put down by the police, and demonstrators were chased away.
就是说，在前一年那个时候是
That's why we thought we would only be able to occupy the plenum for a short time before the police cleared the hall.
也是就是要谈服贸。他当然是说，
The fact that we were able to stay there for so long actually surprised us too.
然后那时候我们说要讲，
Perhaps we also succeeded because we were able to block the entrances so easily. In any case, we were ultimately amazed at our own success.
就是只有20个人。
The sunflower protest was successful. The controversial trade agreement with China was scuttled. Moreover, the conservatives were voted out of office in the subsequent elections in 2016. The liberals took the helm with President Tsai Ing-wen.
绝对不是
Before the Sunflower Movement, the younger generation seemed more disengaged from politics. Meanwhile, the movement has sparked a growing political consciousness and activism among young people. And it is quite important for the development of the Democratic Progressive Party, of which I'm a member.
Lai Ping-yu entered politics after the sunflower protests. Her generation is bolstered by a new democratic self-confidence, which still defines the relationship with China today.
I think Taiwan knows really well the danger of being under authoritarianism rule, the lives and the families and the society that can be lost and broken. Nobody here wants to go back to that. So as long as Xi Jinping continues to threaten the world, global security, in that sense, I don't see how anyone would actively want to be friends with them, let alone to be ruled by them.
Unlike in Xi's China, in democratic Taiwan, people have every opportunity to enjoy self-determined lives and forge their own life plan. Young people who, like Sylvia, return to their parents' homeland to explore their own heritage are welcome. In Taiwan, Sylvia does not have to hide any part of his identity.
I believe that everyone here in Taiwan has their own definition being Taiwanese. For me, I think it is like a home for me because my roots of my family are from here. And although I didn't grow up here, but I felt the love.
Today, Taiwan stands for a modern and open society. Freedom of expression and a diverse press landscape are among the democratic cornerstones of the island republic. Millions of people take part in the Digital Citizens Dialogue every year. Young people in particular use this direct opportunity to influence their country's politics. The vast majority of people here see themselves as Taiwanese, not Chinese. And an equally large majority say they want to defend their young democracy in the event of conflict with China.
The young people here, anybody here, we love our democracy. Democracy here, we have, I think the last presidential election, we had a near 75% voter turnout. That is huge. We don't take our democracy for granted. And criticism is healthy, right? In that sense, is that we're aware of the danger of the lack of democracy. So civic participation is very high, and that's the last thing anybody wants to go back to, which is authoritarianism rule. So when China says they want to reunify Taiwan, we also push back. There's no reunification. It would be an attack. They want to unify, not reunify. We were never a part of the same country.
The young generation in Taiwan differ fundamentally from their grandparents, who immigrated from China. And also from their parents, who were taught by Chiang Kai-shek's regime that they were simply Chinese.
So a lot of people with similar backgrounds were part of the Sunflower Movement, for example, in 2014. Even if you did have parents that were part of the KMT or may have identified with China or even pushed for political unification with China. I think it's part of being Taiwanese today is that identity is still in flux, it's still changing, but increasingly people identify as Taiwanese because it is their lived experience and declining identification with China. And so poll after poll shows us that young people especially identify as Taiwanese overwhelmingly and not as Chinese.
Unlike in China, where public squares are mainly used for marches, the Taiwanese use their public spaces for sports and dance, as here at the Chiang Kai-shek Memorial. It is dedicated to the dictator responsible for the White Terror. For the Taiwanese, the site is a lasting reminder and a constant warning to the young democracy.
This place is having some really complicated feeling for many people and for me because the former president, he used to do a lot of really bad things to people, and this really influenced a lot of people's life. But however, I also think the former president, he also do change the history and even in culture of Taiwan history. So for me, I think this place will always remind me that we have to think about many things in many aspects, but we just don't try to dismiss one part of that.
Many Taiwanese of all ages are outraged that this monument continues to pay homage to the dictator Chiang. There are initiatives demanding that the building be rededicated. Today's Taiwan has nothing in common with Chiang Kai-shek's Republic of China. To make this clear, many people here also no longer call their country Republic of China, but only Taiwan. For China's ruler Xi Jinping, free Taiwan is a constant provocation. In the Chinese president's nationalist ideology, the island has thus become a central theme of his policy. Xi claims that his people are predestined to live under a socialism with Chinese characteristics under the sole rule of the Communist Party. Democracy and human rights, on the other hand, are pure inventions of the West that are not valid in China.
Taiwan's own existence is threatened. His ruling is because Taiwan's example shows democratic society and the culture is possible for ethnic Chinese societies. So that's the fundamental challenge for Chinese Communist parties, because they try to tell their own people is that communism is the only possible way to ruling Chinese peoples, and it's the only possible way for Chinese to be prosperous in the world.
This nationalist narrative of Xi's has begun to develop cracks. In November 2022, the People's Republic experienced protests, the likes of which it had not seen since June 1989. Total surveillance under the pretext of fighting a pandemic turned the population against the ruler. The CCP rescinded its zero-COVID policy overnight. However, the economy in the People's Republic has not recovered after the pandemic, and youth unemployment is higher than ever before. Young Chinese are therefore keeping a close eye on what life is like in Taiwan.
Whenever I talk to the people, the sales, the customers in China, they would talk to us very carefully whenever they first meet you. I would use the word envy, because they're just in this, I would choose the word cage, they are under this pressure that they cannot speak freely, and they look up to the freedom we have.
Compared to China, freedom in Taiwan knows no bounds. Unlike in the People's Republic, people in the queer communities in Taiwan can also express themselves openly. The country was the first in Asia to legalize same-sex marriage. For the annual Pride Parade at the end of October, tens of thousands fly in from all over Asia to show their concern for social equality.
The reason why a lot of people throughout Asia, perhaps even throughout the world, come to Taiwan to enjoy the LGBTQ community is that they can actually come here and be seen and be visible. Taiwan has always been a melting pot of different cultures. It absorbs different cultures. It was formerly a colony of Portugal, of Japan, also of KMT, and every colonialization or every wave of influence, it's left its imprints here. And it's not like summarily rejected, it's kind of built upon. And I think that naturally spills over to creating an open, more democratic society. A more open and democratic society spills out to giving people the concept of equal rights and freedom.
Taiwan is not only modern, democratic, and open to all lifestyles. The island republic is also a prosperous business location. Half of the world's container traffic passes through the Taiwan Strait every year. Kaohsiung, in the southwest of the island, is one of the largest and most important ports in Asia. Isolating Taiwan and its sea lanes would have global repercussions. The island itself produces highly complex semiconductors that find their way into smartphones, refrigerators, and cars the world over. China doesn't have this technology. That's why some observers believe Xi is primarily targeting Taiwan's chip production.
Taiwan produces more than 90% of advanced semiconductors and around 65% of global supply. And so that's quite significant. I mean, it makes Taiwan just crucial to anything from your iPhone to your electric vehicle to your PlayStation and so forth. But I think what's also worth keeping in mind is that China's interest in Taiwan was before its current dominance in semiconductors, which is a factor of the last few decades. And so it's often more, I think, because of territorial reasons or nationalism, or even access to maritime shipping routes that pass around Taiwan. And those are the reasons that China desires Taiwan, and not just because of the semiconductors, even if there's much more focus on this, and even if it does incentivize many Western countries to defend Taiwan because they're reliant on semiconductors from Taiwan.
Although China has the raw materials needed to produce the chips, it cannot manufacture them itself. A disruption in production would also hit China hard. Taiwan's industry could therefore serve as a kind of shield to protect it from its aggressive neighbor.
I mean, I think that in terms of the semiconductor dominance that Taiwan currently has, that's a deterrent for China attacking because they're also dependent on Taiwanese semiconductors, and they would want to preserve the expensive fabs that require billions of dollars to produce if they were to launch an invasion. And so conducting an invasion with minimal disruption, that's what they would hope for. But will that occur, or will they actually be willing to take that risk? That's another question. But I think that particularly there's much more discussion in the past year or 2 years about self-reliance, how Taiwan has to defend itself before it can expect aid from allies.
China regularly conducts blockade exercises in Taiwan's sea lanes. A blockade would cut off the island republic from the outside world and bring all trade to a standstill. Moreover, Taiwan only has a 2-week energy reserve. The most serious maneuver of this kind to date took place in August 2022. Those Chinese naval maneuvers coincided with a visit to Taiwan by then Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi. The Democrat had been highly critical of China's policies for years. The visit provided Beijing with the pretext for a 4-day blockade of the island.
It's not really because that Pelosi visit triggered that kind of event. It's that they use that as an excuse to carry on their long-term goals that to is exercise in the full scale for the possible scenarios they have envisioned as one of the blockades or one of the phase in their possible invasions.
Like many other countries, the United States maintains a diplomatic mission of sorts in Taipei. However, they are not allowed to call it that so as not to provoke Beijing. Since the end of the 1970s, the U.S. has had a law in place to support Taiwan in the event of a crisis.
And now, more than ever, America's solidarity with Taiwan is crucial, and that is the message we are bringing here today. America's determination to preserve democracy here in Taiwan and around the world remains ironclad.
For a long time, Washington has been non-committal about whether it would also intervene directly if China invaded Taiwan. Statements by U.S. President Biden suggest that it would. In any case, Pelosi's visit had tangible consequences for the islanders.
When Nancy Pelosi issue that happens, we were pretty nervous about it because we had like cargoes and we had about 1 ton of teas that was gonna go to China. So we seized it and we didn't go. We didn't let it go. We didn't export it. All the cargoes exporting out to China were seized there and destroyed.
Despite the conflict, the two countries' economies are closely intertwined. The tea trade is just one example, but it illustrates how tense the situation is.
When we do the trading, we have to go through a lot of work because China politics, one thing that they demand, they have to check all the wording on the packaging. Like if we have something, it says oolong teas, and if it's from the origin, we also have to put Taiwan. But sometimes when fun things happen, like politically, they would check the wording. Like they wouldn't let you put Taiwan onto your packaging.
A flight from Taiwan to Hong Kong takes just over an hour. The commercial metropolis has its own story to tell about Xi's regime. Beijing wanted to enforce a law that would have ended the city's autonomy. In 2019, some 2 million people demonstrated against it, demanding that China respect the city's contractual promise of autonomy. Great Britain handed over Hong Kong to the People's Republic in 1997. Under the heading One Country, Two Systems, Beijing had promised to allow the 7 million citizens of Hong Kong to continue living in freedom and in a democracy.
Looking at Hong Kong, I would say they would be the bloodsucker and suck everything out in a short period of time, and they would just abandon you there.
Now, China is even exporting the violence it wreaked on Hong Kong. The People's Republic has put a bounty on the heads of democracy activists who fled abroad to escape Xi Jinping. China also maintains illegal police stations abroad and uses Confucius institutes disguised as cultural institutions to intimidate Chinese citizens who criticize Xi. In Taiwan, people are worried about China's aggression, but they remain largely calm. Nevertheless, in preparation for a possible invasion by Xi, more and more residents are taking survival training courses.
So there's increasing talk of civil defense, and so, for example, there are a lot of civilian organized workshops and trainings to prepare for what to do in case of invasion. This is much discussed after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and so that includes anything from disaster relief, medical training, and also some small arms training, simulated using, for example, paintball guns and things of that sort.
Signs now point to the nearest air raid shelter, where people can take refuge in case of emergency.
We see that growing interest for people are interested in the civil defense part. They try to enroll a class for prepare themselves for civil defense. And we see a growing numbers of female participants interested in self-defense.
In response to China's escalating threat, Taiwan has extended its compulsory military service from 4 months to 1 year, and commercially available defense courses are well attended.
And so that's something as now more people are taking, but that's civilian-led, it's not from the military. The draft is extended back to 1 year. That's another aspect. And the military is trying to reserve training so that there's greater preparedness in society.
Some experts anticipate an attack within a few years. A quick victory by Xi against a well-defended Taiwan is considered unlikely, however.
But the question is then, how useful will this be in invasion? And I think that the average society, member society, sometimes will look at these things and see it as that we are maybe getting a little closer to war.
Some strategists believe that China might launch its attack in 2027. The 100th anniversary of the Chinese army could be an occasion for Xi to demonstrate strength. And it's clear to Asta and her peers that they would also take up arms in the event of an invasion. Surveys indicate that more than 75% of Taiwan's inhabitants would be prepared to join the fight to defend their homeland from the invaders.
Some of my friends had already attended those courses, and they was really like it because it wasn't like a defend and prepare for yourself for the future crisis. Like it was doing something about maybe when emergencies just happen. So I think it's really useful.
The similarities between Taiwan and Ukraine are obvious. Like the Ukrainians, the Taiwanese are ready to fight for their freedom and for democracy. The army is arming itself, and governments from India to Australia view China's escalating aggression with great concern. An invasion of Taiwan would claim a heavy human toll on both sides.
I think the first lessons for Xi Jinping is that there's no rapid and quick victories for that kind of invasions. In the protracted warfares, the outcomes is difficult to predict. It might not really be what he actually originally expected. And that will change the calculus for Xi Jinping, so whether he has the kind of confidence to carry on. But we also need to be keeping in mind that just like Xi Jinping and also for Putin, is that their decision-making process is different.
China has provoked border disputes with all the countries in the region. The danger of war with Xi is therefore not limited to Taiwan. The island state's most important partner is the United States of America. 40 years ago, they made a legal commitment to protect Taiwan's status. Like all his predecessors since then, U.S. President Biden has reaffirmed his country's guarantee to Taiwan.
Our policy in Taiwan has not changed at all. It's the same exact position we've had. I made it clear that we want to see cross-strait issues peacefully resolved, and so it never has to come to that.
Whether the USA would intervene with its troops is not certain, because the battle over Taiwan could so quickly escalate into a nuclear world war. China's rise to nuclear power began with the detonation of its own first atomic bomb in 1964. The USA would probably not take the risk of a nuclear escalation. Xi Jinping is steadily building up his nuclear arsenal. China now has more than 400 operational nuclear warheads. The world is watching Taiwan with concern. However, the people there would like to see an interest in their homeland beyond all war scenarios. The cosmopolitan island republic has a lot to offer, say Asta Wu and her friends. And by that they mean, above all, the island's diverse food. That's what people here like to talk about most. What they ate yesterday, what they would like to eat today, and what they'll have tomorrow.
Because there are so many different foods from different backgrounds, even in traditional Taiwan one. But you also found some foods from like Japan, Thailand, and China. Yeah. So every time when I went to a night market, I feel like it's just like you are going to a local outdoor supermarket, and you could see a lot of things and see a lot of foods. And those food was like they have represent a little different story behind it. Yeah, so it's quite interesting for me.
Asta plans to publish a comic book that will introduce Taiwan's cuisine and dishes and their history to the world.
I think sometimes foods reveal the identity of a people. When you taste or drink something, you was looking for something was from your home, from your country. So I think I will make a comic book. It starts from a little thing like a food and searching back to the original history and how it divided into different parts in Taiwan.
It's amazing how diverse life can be on an island slightly smaller than the Netherlands. Everyone who came to the island brought their cuisine along with them. Their descendants still maintain those culinary traditions to this day. Up in the mountains, clocks run slower than they do in the city. But the main thing about life up there is that it's the realm of the indigenous people. Their fundamental principles are completely different from those of the refugees who came to the island in 1949 and their subsequent generations.
The tribes here in Taiwan are mostly maternal society, and the part that stands out from them is, I think it's the humor that they have. They take everything so positively, and they can joke about anything. They can joke about life, they can joke about themselves, and they're just so positive.
In China, ethnic minorities are oppressed. Xi Jinping has launched a cruel campaign against the Muslim Uyghurs. The people in Tibet and Inner Mongolia also suffer from Beijing's violence.
The countryside, it's very simple because of the people that are working in the factories, in the tea fields. They're just simple. But in the city, it's a melting pot of different cultures, and it's a fast-paced city. These are the differences that I feel the most. But then the common thing for the two places are that they're all friendly.
Even in the cities, you can feel the country's past at every turn. It's a life poised between tradition and modernity. Many people regularly visit the temples. Taoism and Buddhism intermingle in Taiwan. A small minority professes Christianity. Sylvia and Asta both love the variety that Taiwan offers. Nature and mountains in contrast with pulsating city life. The unifying element of Taiwan is the friendly interaction of people all over the island. Life is celebrated, despite or perhaps because of the danger from next door. The Taiwanese absolutely refuse to let Xi Jinping's aggression exert power over their lives and daily routine under any circumstances whatsoever. Taiwan wants to become a full member of the international community. For Beijing, such recognition would be grounds for war. To counter this, Taiwan is working to develop partnerships and alliances at all levels.
I think for Taiwan, I think we need all kinds of support, right? On the government level, diplomatic and military support, yes, right? On the trade level, trade partnership, but also on a people-to-people level, right? I think the more people understand that what Taiwan is, they'll see that, wait, this is a country that absolutely they should love. And that Taiwanese right now are already doing so much good in the world, and that we prove to be really good partners to the world.
Taiwan is open to the future. The Taiwanese see that future primarily in the democratic world and not in an authoritarian China under Xi. Beijing, on the other hand, considers any relationship between Taiwan and another country as a provocation.
I hope Taiwan can soon be fully embraced by the international community. I also hope that Taiwan can open up more so that people from other parts of the world can come to Taiwan, not just visitors, but also as residents who can one day turn into citizens.
The great dream of the Taiwanese is a peaceful existence as a sovereign nation and recognized state within the international community.
We have our life and enjoy our freedoms and way of living here, and we are willing to help the regional allies or process. So I really wish that could be one of the areas we can see, although we have many kinds of difference and difficulty, we have a large consensus. We are stay here, we like live here, and that's what the most worth preserving for.
Taiwan's neighbors value the country as a friend. At the same time, they need China's economic power. This is a dangerous dependency in the long run, which many countries in the region want to balance out through stronger military partnership with the USA.
I think people are starting to realize the dangers of working with China and what it all means for Taiwan. So people are now more open to what we have to say. I hope for our sake that one day we won't have to walk a fine line in international organizations, or that our athletes can walk with our flag and say, "I'm from Taiwan," without China immediately complaining about it.
Xi Jinping speaks of reunification, but the island was never part of the People's Republic. To free Taiwan from its isolation, however, the Western world would have to openly oppose China. That's probably still a utopia.
I think Taiwan is an independent country because we have our own language, own government, and our own land. I know the feeling of freedom, so I can do the thing I love and reach to a topic I want to know more, because I know on the other country, they might forbidden for that. So every time when I draw a book or draw illustration for the topic I want to know, I would like to cherish the chance, because everything for me is just like a gift. So I have to cherish it and make more and know deeper about it, and then turn it into a great story.
Back in Taipei, Silvio is in his cafe preparing for the new day. Even in young, hip Taipei, people are still drawn to the old, traditional tea ceremony from Imperial China. Like most Taiwanese, Silvio has learned to block out the threat. A good cup of tea has a calming effect.
I actually don't feel the stresses from the pressures from China, because all they have to, they're actually making a show to their own people. My friends or my clients in China, they were actually asking us, they were so nervous about it, and they were asking us, how are things, in Taiwan? Are you guys okay? Because we see the news and we see the people, the press of China is actually threatening you guys, And then all the people here, we feel nothing at all.
China's sword-waving, its military buildup, and the way it treats Taiwan are of grave concern to the free world. Only Xi knows if and when he will start a war against the small island nation. Nevertheless, the people in Taiwan are trying their best to cope with the pressure and continue to live normal lives. They certainly do not want to lose their freedom.
I will say I wish this could be, that Taiwan could be like a free, that restore the freedoms we have here, and also the kind of kindness we have here in Taiwan.
Taiwan freed itself from the violence and terror of Chiang Kai-shek's dictatorship. The Taiwanese are proud of their young democracy, but perhaps their greatest struggle is yet to come. A struggle for their freedom that could drag the whole world into the abyss. Because Taiwan's democracy is in the crosshairs of a totalitarian China and its leader, Xi Jinping.
I wish the Taiwanese people to be prosper, the prosperity, the wealthy, healthy, to be well in the future.